Everybody, this is Rick Doblin, and I very much look forward to being able to address you a little bit. I'll share my screen and start my brief presentation in just a second. Great. So I'm going to be speaking about nonprofit psychedelic drug development, MDMA-assisted therapy for PTSD. I'm aware that you are all seeking investments, but I hope our story will help you realize that some of these investments might actually pay out. And we're also looking for philanthropy, if anybody's interested. Since it's called the Wolf Summit, I just wanted to start with this picture of me and my wolf. This was from age 21 to 23. I got this wolf, I called him Phaedrus from Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. Also, Phaedrus is the Greek name for wolf. And Phaedrus is a character in the Plato dialogues from the countryside. And part of the dialogues are about the taming power of love. And so I raised this wolf from 8 weeks old till a little bit over 2 years. And then I found a place in a wolf sanctuary, a female wolf that needed a mate by someone who would take these wolves to the US Congress sometimes to show them that they are not the fearsome animals. They don't attack people. They're tremendous animals, actually. And I learned a whole lot from Phaedrus. And one of the things I learned was to go straight ahead. You know, they have abundant energy and they'll go through bushes or over hills, or they're not looking for the easy way out. So this is a picture of a boy and his wolf in Sarasota, Florida. But now to the point of what we're talking about. Psychedelics are to the study of the mind, what the microscope is to biology and the telescope is to astronomy. And we know that the telescope produced some controversial things back when it was first developed, such as the fact that the Earth wasn't the center of the universe, and that conflicted with religious authorities, and Galileo died under house arrest. Paulo Bruno was burned at the stake by the church, and now we see the telescope as just a tool that's teaching us about the universe. And I hope that psychedelics will be seen as a tool as well, that it'll shed its controversial nature, and that's exactly what's happening. This is Alex Gray, an artist, and this is his interpretation of the MAPS logo. The reason I'm showing it to you here is to emphasize that the psychedelic is in the background and the human hands helping each other is in the foreground. So what that means is that it's psychedelic assisted therapy that we're about. The therapy is the critical part. It's humans helping humans. And then the psychedelics enhance the therapy. So that's our main theme, again, that this is therapy and should be seen that way. It's not psychedelics in and of themselves. Drugs are not good or bad in and of themselves. It's the context in which they're used that determine whether it's productive or harmful. This psychedelic looking image was actually from a bit more than 2 years ago, was created by the FDA. And at this conference, they announced that they were going to be creating a guidance document for sponsors who want to do research with psychedelics. It's still not created yet, but the important point here is that the FDA is open to this sort of research, as are regulatory agencies all over the world. And we're in the midst of a renaissance of psychedelic research. So if you look at the peak early, this is now over 70 years of scientific publications about psychedelics. In the late 60s, early 70s was a peak, then there was the backlash, then the research was wiped out all over the world. The scientific publications dwindled to almost nothing. Those that were published were about the risks of psychedelics, none about or very few about clinical research or anything beneficial. But then in 1990, the group at the FDA that regulated psychedelics gave that responsibility to a new group that really wanted to start research. And that new group started opening the door to psychedelic research in 1990, first with Rick Strassman doing a DMT study, and then 1992 with MAPS and Charlie Grobe, psychiatrist out in California, with the MDMA for a phase 1 dose response safety study. So that sort of opened things up in the US and around the world. And now you can see that there's an enormous number of papers about psychedelics published, and it's increasing even. So this is just really a remarkable situation about a renaissance in psychedelic research. And as you know, that's spawned now hundreds of psychedelic companies, for-profit companies. MAPS, though, was started in 1986 by me, April 1986, and we've had now 35 years of psychedelic science. Our corporate structure is MAPS, the nonprofit. When I started this, there was no way that anybody would invest because it seemed impossible. So the only approach was philanthropy. So MAPS is the 501c3 US nonprofit. We also have MAPS Deutschland, which is a nonprofit, MAPS Israel, MAPS Canada. Those are all nonprofits that can accept donations from people in those countries and give them tax deductions. And we have corresponding organizations in many other countries as well. And so MAPS then invests the money in the MAPS Public Benefit Corporation, which we started in December of 2014. And that's after I realized that MDMA didn't automatically need to go generic. And I'll explain that in a second. But what this demonstrates is that we want to model two different things. One is psychedelic assisted therapy, but the other is a new way to market drugs. And we think that the profit motive in healthcare is really not that healthy, and that corporations that put public benefit above profit are a better way to go. So the Public Benefit Corporation is for profit, but it maximizes public benefit, not profit. And so MAPS gives people tax deductions. We put the money in the Public Benefit Corp. Public Benefit Corp does the research. We'll eventually, we hope, make MDMA into a medicine, we think at the end of 2023. Then we will sell it for a profit for a period of time, and then whatever profits come go back to the mission of the nonprofit. So the Public Benefit Corporation is 100% owned by the nonprofit. So that's our corporate structure, the virtuous circle. What permits us to sell MDMA for a profit, even though the fact that we have no patents, that MDMA is invented by Merck in 1912, it's in the public domain. In the late 1980s, early 90s, I hired a patent attorney to develop an anti-patent strategy. So nobody could patent the uses of MDMA, or at least all the ones that we were aware of at the time. And in 1984, Ronald Reagan signed this bill to provide incentives for developing drugs that were off patent. And these are little known because pharma doesn't develop drugs that are off patent. Almost never. So data exclusivity, what that means is that we have exclusive use of our data. In the US, it's 5 years. If we do pediatric studies, which we're required to do already by FDA, if we succeed in adults with MDMA for PTSD, that's defined as 18 years or over, we must, in what are called phase 4 studies you're required to do after approval, we must do 12 to 17-year-olds with PTSD. With MDMA. You get an extra 6 months data exclusivity for doing that. And then it blocks a generic competitor from applying to the FDA until the 5.5 years is over, and it takes FDA at least 6 months to review the application. So it's going to be 6 years data exclusivity. It's not a patent, so that other companies, if they wanted to, can develop MDMA into a medicine for PTSD using their own data, but it'll take them 6 years. So they're not going to do that. They'll just wait for our data exclusivity to be over. But what actually they will do, and this is already happening, is several companies are going to be trying to develop MDMA-like drugs, modifications of the molecule, or to do some kind of similar thing that they can patent and then say that it's got some advantage in one way or another over MDMA. If they develop something better than MDMA, I'd like to be one of the first ones to try it. But I think we will have this data exclusivity if we succeed. And in Europe, it's 10 years. It's actually 8 years data exclusivity. Then applicants for generics can apply, but you get an additional 2 years of what's called market exclusivity. So it's basically 10 years in Europe. Our phase 3 studies are in US, Israel, and Canada. Canada looks more towards the European approach for data exclusivity. It looks like Israel is going to use the US approach, but there is data exclusivity all over the place in many, many countries of the world. So this is, once I learned about this, I didn't know about this when I started MAPS, and I took food and drug regulation at Harvard Law School. Nobody even mentioned this. I didn't even know about it until 2013 when I sort of stumbled into it. And that's where we said, aha, we've got a different model. What we can tell our donors is if you give us money, it's a lot, but eventually we'll be able to generate funds from the sale of MDMA for a reasonable profit, and that will fund further research and staff costs. We now have about 130 people, around 100 work for the Public Benefit Corp and 30 work for the nonprofit. Our public benefit model is different than a for-profit model. I'm going to go clockwise at 12 o'clock. The most important thing is we maximize therapeutic outcomes for each patient, not profit. Ketamine, esketamine was approved for treatment-resistant depression, but it was approved without therapy. It doesn't work as well as if it is provided with therapy. The results fade, you need more ketamine, esketamine. So the pharma company doesn't know anything about therapy and just made it into a medicine without therapy. And that way you need more ketamine. And so if you provide therapy, then a lot of the money goes to the therapist, which the pharma company doesn't get, and the results you can integrate and they're better and longer lasting, you need less esketamine. So in any case, we are maximizing therapeutic outcomes, not profit. We share our findings instead of creating IP protection. We're about to make public our synthesis for the GMP MDMA. We're not going to patent that. We want to create MAPS as a model, an ethical practice to serve as a model for the for-profit industry. We don't think all the for-profit companies will become public benefit companies, but we hope they will adopt some of our procedures based on consumer pressure, you could say. We're supportive of for-profit organizations. We need that for scaling. In the last couple of years, MAPS has raised around $50 million. Overall, we've raised $130 million in our history. But the for-profits have raised about $1.5 billion in the last couple of years. So we are aware of the need for-profit corporations to flourish, to scale, to meet the need. We are not sympathetic with overbroad patents, but even if there are real patents for innovations, original innovations, that's fine with us as well. Down here at 6 o'clock, we're in favor of drug policy reform. This is a really important thing. We think people should, prohibition is counterproductive, it's authoritarian, it's repressive. We should not, it's racist, it's used for other purposes. It's never, ever been about reducing drug abuse. It's always had ulterior motives, police power, corruption. So we think that there should be legal access in what we're calling licensed legalization. You get a license to do a drug. If you misbehave, you get punished for your misbehavior, but not for your state of consciousness. And then you lose your license for a period of time for more education. Just think about drunk drivers who lose their driver's license, but can easily go to a bar or liquor store, get drunk, and then go back in their car and kill people. So we should make it harder for them to get alcohol as well. So I think the for-profit companies, and for those of you that are thinking of investing or have already invested, I think there's a fundamental mistake about the business model that for-profit companies are making. And I think a lot of them are assuming that if there's legal access in licensed legalization or any other form for psychedelics, if you can legally buy mushrooms for $10 or MDMA for $20 or LSD for $5 or whatever it is, that that's bad for the business model. Why would people come to your clinic and pay whatever you're charging for the drug? Could even be thousands of dollars because of all the money it takes, the mega millions it takes to make these drugs into a medicine. I think that the more we destigmatize this, the more it's legal, the more people are aware of this, the more people try these drugs, the more people will end up saying, I want to go to the clinics with trained professionals. They can customize a program to me. They'll be cross-trained in MDMA, psilocybin, ketamine, 5-MeO, DMT, whatever else. So I think the drug policy reform is actually going to be good for the business model, but even if it's bad for the business model, it's a moral imperative to end prohibition, provide people access to these drugs. So that's a big part of our public benefit model. But if we make this a licensed legalization, we want to embed in the culture, in the society, information about harm reduction, how to do these things to avoid harms, how to get the most benefits, benefit enhancement, and psychedelic peer support, which we do at festivals and Zendo Project all over the world. We help people with difficult psychedelic experiences. And that's part of trying to make it so that the legalization risks of it are addressed and minimized. We support the use of psychedelics not just for medical conditions, but for personal and spiritual growth, or just for celebration, for dancing all night, for whatever. That should be available to people. And we're interested in conflict resolution. So couples therapy is not a disease. We're very interested in MDMA for couples therapy, but also cultural conflicts. And we think psychedelics can play a major role. So there's a small study we're doing with Imperial College, Leo Roseman and Robin Card-Harris, with Israelis and Palestinians who are doing ayahuasca and MDMA together, underground illegally, but at the same time. And these are experiences that are happening. The first year of this study was interviews with people, and the second 2 years will be actual experiments. But this is our public benefit model. As I said, we raised over 130 million in donations and grants. We just got 12.9 million from the state of Michigan for marijuana PTSD study in 320 veterans. But now we're looking to raise $150 million, $50 million a year for 3 years. And that's to commercialize MDMA in the US, to globalize, to do MDMA PTSD research in Europe, and then to reach sustainability for all of our staff, which we think, and for more research, which we think will happen in the middle of 2024 from the profits from the sale of MDMA by PTSD, assuming, of course, that we get permission. FDA declared MDMA a breakthrough drug in August 15th, 2017 for PTSD. There's only one other drug that's been declared a breakthrough drug for PTSD, a drug called Tonmya by a pharmaceutical company, Tonix Pharmaceuticals, and that drug has failed in phase 3 multiple times and is going nowhere. So we're the only breakthrough therapy drug for PTSD still standing. Since then, FDA has made psilocybin a breakthrough therapy for major depression disorder and also treatment-resistant depression. Treatment-resistant depression by Compass and major depressive disorder by the nonprofit USONA. This is our therapeutic approach. It's 3.5 months. It's 42 hours of therapy with a male-female co-therapy team. It's more important to say it's a 2-person team. It's not always that way. Sometimes it's 2 women or 2 men, but it's mostly male-female. There's 3 8-hour sessions, and you either get the top row or the bottom row if you're a subject. And there are 12 90-minute non-drug psychotherapy sessions as well. 3 before the first MDMA or placebo session for preparation, and then 3 of these 90-minute sessions after each experimental session for integration. And then we look at the 2-month follow-up to compare the results in the 2 groups. That's what FDA looks at for approval and other regulatory agencies. We also do a 1-year follow-up, and that's to see if it's really durable, and that's for insurance companies, because this is labor intensive at the beginning. And we give, after the initial amount, half that after 2 hours to extend the plateau. So 80 milligrams followed by 40 milligrams, or there's a discussion between the therapist and the patients, but in general, almost everybody will go up to 120 milligrams followed by 60. And then for the 3rd session, mostly 120 milligrams followed by 60. But again, we can personalize the doses a bit. And we use an inactive placebo. That's a longer discussion about how we develop the methodology, but it's really the best approach. And both FDA and European Medicines Agency have agreed with this therapeutic approach. So you can see that, again, that we're trying to maximize patient outcomes. We think a 3-session model makes sense. A 1-session model, I think, is 1 dose miracle cure, doesn't really last as much, although occasionally people can benefit from just 1 session. After we had breakthrough therapy and completed our negotiations with FDA over the design of phase 3, we went to Europe, and we had our scientific advice meeting, and we were approved for 1 phase 3 study with only 70 people in Europe. But that's because they will accept the 2 phase 3 studies that we need for the FDA as well. We were requested to enroll refugees and migrants into our study, and the same design was approved with inactive placebo, therapy with MDMA versus therapy with inactive placebo. These are the countries, 9 sites in 6 countries. We don't have anything in Poland, although we'd be interested in speaking to researchers at some point who might be interested in learning how to do MDMA, and eventually we need to get it approved by the European Medicines Agency, but then we need to negotiate with each country's national health insurance to see if they'll cover it. And we've just started training the therapists in Europe, and we've enrolled people so far in the Netherlands and also in Prague, the Czech Republic, and we're starting over the next couple of months in all these other sites. We published the results of our first phase 3 study in Nature Medicine. We completed it in 2020, but it took us a long time in October 2020, it took us a long time to write up the data, get it published, work through the peer review process. New York Times, a big article about it. Psychedelic drug passes a big test. It was a terrific article, but a week later, front page, psychedelic revolution is coming. Psychiatry may never be the same. We think that's true. And this was also a lot about our study. Scientific American, MDMA shows new promise for trauma, but the drug alone is not a cure. That's really what we're trying to emphasize. As I said with Alex Grace, it's therapy enhanced by MDMA. And then this was the quote from Scientific American: 2/3 of PTSD sufferers do not respond to conventional treatments. These results are phenomenal. I've honestly never seen such a successful trial. So this was great, but what are the results? We had a very small p-value, that's probability. So in order to have a statistically significant study, you need 0.05, which means 5% or a nickel out of a dollar, 1 in 20 chance that it's due to random factors. And you need 2 of those. But our first study was 1 in 10,000, 0.000. So astounding p-value. We had a very large effect size. You can have statistical significance for minor effects. The larger numbers of people you have in the study, the more you work out variability, the more you increase your ability to get statistical significance. But statistical significance alone doesn't mean that much in terms of whether it has a significant impact on people's symptoms. That's effect size. And an effect size of 1 is 1 standard deviation from the norm. And there's 2 different ways to look at effect size. One is placebo subtracted, that's the normal way. But in our case, the placebo is not inactive, it's therapy. And the therapy can be quite effective. But we had a 0.91, which is terrific. The SSRIs that are approved for PTSD were like 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, small to low medium, and this was large. But when you look at the within subjects, the people that got therapy with MDMA, we had a 2.1 effect size, which is 2 standard deviations from the norm. Phenomenal. We replicated results from our phase 2 trials. Actually, this phase 3 study was actually even better. We don't have site-to-site variability. What that means is that it's not that most of our data is coming from these super highly trained therapists and they're getting great results, but at the other sites, it's not really working much. That suggests, if that were to be the case, that it's not scalable. But we had no site-to-site variability. We had about 75 therapists, most of them new to phase 3. And we also had a good safety profile and no increase in suicidality in the MDMA group. We had 2 people in the first phase 3 study. One person tried to kill herself twice. The other person was so severely suicidal, she checked herself into a hospital, not to kill herself, and both of these people were in the placebo group. None of this happened in the MDMA group. Now, how will this be regulated post-approval? And the FDA has these policies called REMS, Risk Evaluation and Mitigation Strategies. So the first thing is the prescribers need special training, only prescribed by prescribers certified in the REMS program. We will provide a 2 to 4 hour training for the prescribers. Then the therapist, not every therapist can do this. It's only therapists who have been through the MDMA therapy training program that we have developed. It's 100 hours online or 6 days in person. And then we supervise people as they work with their first PTSD patient. We review the videotapes. And then also we have a protocol to give MDMA to therapists as part of their training. That's a key part, but that's always going to be optional. So only trained therapists, only administered under direct supervision of the therapist, only prescribed by prescribers who've been through our training program, special safety procedures that are required for everybody, screening. MDMA increases blood pressure. So we look at whether there's hypertension, things like that. And then the limited distribution models mean that it will never be prescribed to the patient. It's going to be prescribed to the prescriber and administered in the clinic, no take-home drugs. So this is easy to regulate from a drug abuse perspective. And these are what we're going to be starting out our negotiations with FDA. They may require a patient registry. We're going to try to avoid that, but we'll see. That just is a track record of every patient that's been through it. This is our big plans. We are planning during this period of data exclusivity, this is just US only, to have 1 million MDMA sessions. And we figure on average, it'll probably be 2-session model, so 500,000 patients. The blue bars are the number of patients that will be treated each year in thousands. Underneath this practicing therapists, that number is the number of therapists that we are training. And so we're planning to train 25,000 therapists in this period of data exclusivity. And that's a lot of therapists, but it's nowhere near the need, because there are 9 million PTSD patients just in America. And what the tan line above the bars is the capacity. If the therapists were doing nothing but treating MDMA, using MDMA to treat PTSD, as much of the time their work hours as they could, we would have excess capacity. So we may be able to treat more than 1 million or have more than 1 million MDMA sessions. And what this doesn't account for is group therapy. And so we're going to be trying to explore group therapy. Now, I know you're all interested in money, and we hired the financial aspects of this, the investment aspects of this. So we have hired the Boston Consulting Group, a big consulting company, to do a commercialization go-to-market plan. And we are anticipating, depending on what the price is, substantial profits that we will then reinvest in more research and public education and all of that for the mission of the nonprofit. But most of the money will probably stay in the benefit corp for more studies. So I think that there is an enormous unmet need. We've demonstrated that psychedelics really can, at least MDMA so far, can be helpful. This is our timeline, complicated slide, but the main thing is to say that our second phase 3 study will be done in October of 2022. This is just about the US. We think that Europe will be, as I said, 1 year behind or so, approval near the end of 2024. We think we'll have FDA approval in the US by the 3rd quarter of 2023, and DEA then has 90 days to reschedule, and that'll take place, we think, before the end of 2023. These are all the different modules and things like that. But this is our best estimate. We're always updating this. And I think that there is this enormous opportunity for meeting an unmet need, for generating profits, and for really helping what our goal is, which is mass mental health. Humanity as a whole is like a cancer on the earth. We're destroying the environment, climate change and all. We're killing each other. Incredible weapons of mass destruction, move towards authoritarianism all over the place. We need mass mental health. And so that is our goal. And that's we're glad that we've been funded so far by donors. So we'll see what we have to do to get the next $150 million. But our goal will remain mass mental health. And so I'd like to encourage all of you to really keep that in mind. It's not just about making money, it's about saving the planet and saving humanity. We also then do the Zendo project, as I mentioned. We're going to start training more people in the public for peer support, this post-prohibition future that we're working to. And we have a contract with the city of Denver, Colorado, to train their police officers in what to do if they encounter people with a difficult trip. And Denver was the first city in America to make mushrooms the lowest enforcement priority. So we're trying to make it so that these drug policy reforms actually work. These are some of the events that we've worked at, bringing all over the world with the Zendo project. And we are now, as I mentioned, training the Denver police, and if that works, we'll train about 3,000 of the Denver first responders, and we hope to bring that to other cities around the country and potentially around the world. So I wish I could be there in person, but I can't. Sorry, I can't be there, I don't think, to answer any questions, but the main message I want to leave you with is that this is a growing field, and it's based on something solid, which is people have used psychedelics for thousands of years, and now we're getting over the controversy from the 60s, and we're able to try to make them medicines. And I encourage all of you to help do your part for the psychedelic renaissance.